And I think it was really helpful for women, especially as it was a women only sauna. So I think that allowed me a easier way to kind of engage in that activity without feeling all of the emotions and all of the nervousness.
Hoi Zama, and welcome to Body Talk, where we have strong opinions about spas, saunas, and bathing experiences from around the world. I'm Sarah, your host. At Body Talk, we bring you spa and sauna recommendations so you can plan your next bathing adventure or get inspired to give sauna or bathing a try. We also feature interviews with experts and folks from our body community, as well as professionals in the bathing world, and we deep dive into your questions about bathing rituals and cultural experiences. Things like, what are the best wild saunas in the UK? What exactly makes a sauna a Finnish sauna? Or what's the difference between a dry sauna and a steam room? Our name, Badii, that's Badii, is inspired by the Swiss German word for bathing culture. We're American, but Body Talk was born from a love of Switzerland. Let's go. Today, I'm joined by a member of the Body community, Alexandra Smedley. And together, we're going to talk about a topic that I know is on many of our listeners' minds: to be or not to be naked, whether that's in a thermal bath or a sauna experience. And we're going to reflect on the cultural differences, guiding preferences there, a little bit about the science behind having a naked experience, and some of the pros and cons. We're also going to highlight one of my favorite public saunas. It's called Kulttuurisauna. It's in Helsinki, Finland, and Alex and I both went there together. Um, Alex joins us today from Zurich, Switzerland. She's American, but she's lived around the globe, most notably in Shanghai, China, actually where I met her, and now currently in Zurich, Switzerland. And Alex has joined me on many a sauna and bathing experience around Europe, and we're really excited to have her on the show today. So let's get started.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Alex. Okay. So in Switzerland and Germany, it's common to see these textile-free saunas and thermal baths, right? And this means that there's no bathing suits allowed, and this is taken quite strictly. So you will get a side eye if you try to show up in a textile-free area with a bathing suit. Towels are permitted, so you can wear a towel around you if you want, but most people just embrace the nudity of it. They are usually co-ed, but often they have women-only saunas or women-only sections. Um, and in my experience, the textile-free saunas have more options for experiences. So things like Aufguss or a scrub. So it's usually worth, getting over your nervousness to try them out so you can get access to some of those experiences. So Alex, you're originally American. You are from America. You are American.
I
You've been,
am.
but you've been living in Switzerland for a
Depending
few.
on the day, I
Yeah,
I confess to that, but yes.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But you've been living in Switzerland for a few
I
years, right?
have. Yes, so, since about November of 2022, I've been here in Switzerland, and as you mentioned, previous to that, we met in Shanghai. Yep.
That's great. Yeah, so it's been a couple years now, but thinking back to when you first got to Switzerland, what was
Yes.
your first reaction to this textile-free area? I don't know if you first maybe went to a German spa or a Swiss spa, but either way, what was your first reaction?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it was Switzerland where I saw my first textile-free area. My first reaction really was, "Stay away."
Me
I
too.
wasn't quite yeah, I wasn't quite ready to delve into the world of textile free, but, I think it's been really an evolution. I think as you obviously can attest to as well, I think it's something you kinda have to see and work your way up to. So, coming from America, it's not uncommon, and I still see it even on my Instagram of people going into a sauna with gym clothes on, and it
Uh,
wasn't really until I got educated here in Switzerland that I realized just how unhygienic that is and some
yeah.
of the reasons behind why it's more important to either go in with, a bathing suit if you really feel like you need something, or really kind of getting comfortable with the idea of just a towel and or naked. So definitely it was Switzerland where I first started exploring that.
Yeah, me too, and I think I had a similar reaction, and, um, I actually had more exposure to sauna in Switzerland than I did in America, and it's interesting because I've relocated back to the US now, and I noticed just what you said, people go into saunas, you know, fully in their workout clothes, shoes, socks included, and your first reaction like, I understand because we don't have that sauna culture here, but now having been in Europe, it's like, "Oh, no, that's gonna get saturated with sweat."
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and so I actually think I'm laughing because I remember the time you and I went to 47 together, which is the spa here in Baden, and we were trying to find the textile-free area,
Mhm.
and again, it linked back to those experiences, right? Because I think it was the hammam we were trying to experience, and we could not find it.
Yeah.
And then I think we both kinda were like, "Okay, well, we tried, and now it's over." But I've since gone back to 47 actually with my partner, which is something I'm happy to share about that experience because I think it was unique in 2 different ways, right? Both like
Mm,
from a bonding experience with him, but also it was the first time where I actually found the textile-free area and then fully
nice.
indulged in it as well. So,
Oh, that's great.
like I
Yeah,
said, it's been a true evolution.
thankfully, I also found that area eventually, which I mean, I lived down the street from 47, so I had no excuse there, but I did finally find it, and it is really nice because they do have, like, the Aufguss and the other sort of experiences, like you said.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about your experience, going with your partner. I've gone with friends, I,
Yeah.
have done solo, but yeah, curious to hear your experience with that.
Yeah, I guess well, first I will say, like, I was because thinking about this and, like, ahead of the, podcast, I was thinking, I was like, "When was the first time I kind of tried going into a sauna, textile-free for the first time?" And, like, 2, instances came to mind. One, again, we're kind of lucky here that it is so ingrained into the culture. So, I remember one summer, I think it was the first full summer I spent here, I signed up for the Migros Fitness Park, which is a
Mm,
chain of gyms here, but one of the nice things is it offers typically the locations offer a sauna. And then the thing you mentioned earlier, and I think it was really helpful for women especially, is it was a women-only sauna. So I think that allowed me a easier way to kind of engage in that activity without feeling all of the emotions and all of the nervousness. So that
mhm.
was the first time, was there. I remember still wrapped myself in my towel, but I went
Yeah.
in. There was really only one other woman. She was not still in her towel, so I finally felt like, "Okay, I can do this." And I remember just letting the towel drop and being like, "This is not as bad as you think it is." And it
Mhm.
actually, like, is such a it's a more enjoyable experience just given yeah, to the point, like, you're sitting there, you're sweating, you're, like, really trying to check in with your body, your soul, and so the less layers you have, like, the easier it is to do that. Um, but fast forward, I would say, yeah, last I think it was November, was maybe one of the most notable experiences I had because, like I said, it was with my partner. At that time, we had been together, probably, like, 7, 8 months, and it was the first time we were going to the spa together. So that
Oh.
in itself was, like, a nice
Swiss
yeah.
dating milestone.
This dating
Yeah.
milestone, exactly. And then he was immediately so excited to find the textile-free area
Of course.
as
He's
the
Swiss.
true Swiss
Yeah,
person. Yes, we
yeah.
should note he's very Swiss. So he was really excited. I, again, had it in my head that I would probably just start with keeping a towel on.
Mhm.
However, the experience that we had was in a steam room, and it was because they were bringing a really nice scrub around. So as we approached and people were waiting, I noticed no one had a towel on. So
Okay.
again, I actually kind of gave into that peer pressure of it was twofold, right? One, it's a bit like, well, okay, if they're comfortable, why can't I be comfortable enough to do that? But then also it was like, okay, there's probably a reason no one's taking their
Yeah.
towel in a steam room, it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, so we did. We embarked on that journey where we entered the steam room. Again, everyone fully naked. And I think it was just again, it's so interesting. I think not even from a you're like you look around, but not from like a sexual point of view or anything. It's just more
Mhm.
curiosity of how is everyone finding this experience? Is everyone feeling the same as me in terms of like potentially overthinking, like thinking about what do I look like? Is anyone else
Mhm.
looking? And there's, like, a range. It's a spectrum like anything, like, you can tell, there's other people that are kinda keeping their arms crossed, there's some people who's just so comfortable, they're letting it all hang out, and
Always
so
a few of those.
yeah, it's just the most welcoming kind of atmosphere because everyone goes at their own pace, but we're all finding that commonality, that common ground through, like, just being free, honestly. And honestly, then I think back too, because I'm like, that's probably still such an American mindset to have, because for
Mm,
Europeans who are, like, used to it, they're not thinking anything about it.
that's
So,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, for
different.
us, it's a bit it's, like, especially liberating, I think. Because we're used to well, it's very taboo, any sort of, like, nudity, right?
Yeah.
Even, like, for example, Swiss people are always jumping into bodies of water, like a lake, a river, right? And there's no you're out in nature, there's no changing areas, so, like, you're gonna
No.
strip down and, you know, e some people do jump in nude, and some people
Mhm.
change into their bathing suits, and even the act of changing into your bathing suit outside, there's in America, I feel like, when you were younger, right, girls would like you'd stand around in a circle with towels and
Yes.
like, and I get where that comes from for sure, but like from a safety standpoint. But it is, I feel like in Switzerland, people were just more open even about that, which is it's different and it's kind of and it is as an American a little bit more freeing to not have to worry about that. Um and
Absolutely.
know that there's not the same I think there's like this there isn't that same sexual undertone or implication to it either, um, and obviously people's experience vary too because, I've been in, a naked sauna in Germany, and I did feel like, some men it was co-ed and, some men were, staring inappropriately and things like that, but generally, I don't feel that, and you feel quite open in these European saunas in that experience, yeah.
Yeah, thankfully, I haven't had that, but I think you've had a few more experiences than I, especially in the mixed
Mm.
areas. Like I said, I think the more times than not, I'm in all women's, but this, like I said, this was the first time I was in a mixed. Um, but yeah, I would say traditionally, I think everyone is respectful of that. And it's a very respectful place. So hopefully you don't get a lot of that. But to your point, there are some people. There's always a couple bad ones in the
Yeah.
bunch. Yeah.
But it is great, it's quite common to have these women-only sections as well, and, that's a great place for women who are maybe uncomfortable going into the co-ed, which is totally understandable, or wanna
Yes.
give, naked, bathing a try, like, the women's area is a great option for that, and there really is so I mean, it is so comfortable, and I think it's empowering to see other women just embracing it and embracing, their bodies as not something that they're preoccupied with, but just letting it go and kind of being there and being present.
Absolutely. I would totally agree.
We touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about the cultural observations we've seen on, being naked in the bath. So, in Germany and Switzerland, textile free is quite strict, so if it's a naked sauna, you really do need to be naked, and, wearing a bathing suit in a textile free area is considered unhygienic. You talked about this in the beginning, you're collecting the sweat and stuff in the bathing suit, and folks will think of that as unhygienic. And I think it's considered a bit of a disrespect to the naked bathers if you show up in a bathing suit. So,
Yes.
there is a reason why they have the textile free areas and the textile areas and the women's only textile free as well. Um, we touched on this a little bit, but Germans and the Swiss, they don't sexualize nakedness the same way that American culture does. But the presence of women's only areas is still important. Um, and then, in public saunas and baths, nakedness seems to be becoming less common. And I do think that this is my conjecture, but it feels like that might have to do with the rise of social media and cell phones because, I think some people, well, it depends on the spa, right? I love 47 in Baden, and they don't allow cell phones, and I think it creates a comfortable atmosphere. But I went to a QC Terme in San Pellegrino in Italy, and they allow cell phones, and in fact, it was a bit of the experience was sort of, "Oh, capture stuff on social media," right? And I don't think there's any chance I would have gone naked in an environment like that knowing that, like, you could be caught on camera, and who's recording and whatnot. So, but
Yes.
any other cultural observations you've noticed or things you that are worth mentioning?
I think it's just kind of goes back to what we were saying and like it being more widely accepted. So this is kind of me sharing a story, not of my firsthand encounter, but I was at a friend's birthday party. She's a Swiss friend, and I was talking to one of her other attendees of the party who spent a lot of time in America. So I think she has a lot more of the
Mm,
Americanized thoughts around sauna culture. And her and I actually got into this little debate because she was like, "I can't believe that she goes to the sauna with men from her company." Like, that's something they do. Like, after work,
mm,
they instead of a happy hour, they'll go straight to the sauna. It's a textile-free sauna, and again, it's mixed, and as colleagues, that's something they do to go decompress after work. And I had this moment where I was kind of arguing both sides because
yeah.
again, having been in Switzerland for 2 years, having to realize like, come to realize how ingrained it is in the culture and how it's really not viewed as this, like, taboo or shocking thing to be mixed and naked in a sauna. I was kind of, standing up for her and saying, "Oh, I don't see anything wrong with that."
Mm,
Now, having said that, when I stepped back and thought about my own experience and, like, would I go to a naked
yeah.
spot, like a textile-free sauna with colleagues of mine? Absolutely not, right? So,
That's my
again,
gut
I
reaction as well. So American
yes.
of us, but yeah.
So
Yeah.
American of us, but, like,
Yeah.
I can respect that, and again, when I'll probably reference him a lot, but when I talk to my partner about it, again, he thought nothing of it, and so
Mhm.
it's really just to say it's kind of second nature, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts, I've heard people like, like Heidi Klum, who grew up in Germany, who spoke about being naked in the house all the time, like, they just it was actually unnatural to wear clothes in the house versus the other way around, and so again, I think it's just what I would say to, like, listeners who are, like, really curious about it is, like, dig into the cultural differences more because that's truly, it's just really night and day different in terms of how people view being naked, being textile free, especially in the sauna, which I think is viewed as,
Mhm.
like, this sacred space, but really just anywhere. As you said, even at the lake, you turn around and people are just they're
Oh,
stripping down
yeah.
and they're going for it. Like, we've mastered the,
Yeah.
sports bra over bra,
We
like, how
have.
do you change without showing
Yeah.
nothing?
Yeah.
But here it's like yeah, it's just so freeing. It's still,
Mhm.
not viewed as anything taboo.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
this, like, less preoccupation with, like, yeah, that piece, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because, both of us have lived abroad in a few different places now, and, like and so some of our listeners probably have and some have not, and I think what's interesting about living abroad is some of the things that you think are maybe, like, fundamental experiences or
Mhm.
values, like, as a human, are not. They're, like, actually culturally informed. Like, for example, I was doing, a tutoring lesson with my German teacher, and there was
Mhm.
this video that we were watching, and, they have these videos where they're acting out, right, German to help you,
Yes.
and, I think you
It's
know which one.
amazing acting
Yeah,
too.
top
Yeah.
notch. Yeah,
Top
it's
notch,
actually
yeah.
it's free through the German government, it's a very cool program, but anyway, but yeah, so they had this video, and this young guy was staying with this older woman, she was, letting him be doing a kindness to him, and he was doing
Mhm.
her laundry, and, he was putting out, like, her underwear, and I was
Okay.
like
Mortified for her?
I, like, was, like, uncomfortable. I said something to my tutor, and she was, like, confused. My tutor's German, and she's like,
Yep.
"But that's not" she's like, "What's the problem?" And I'm like, "Well" and I was like, "Oh my god, this is a cultural thing." I don't know. It didn't even I'd already been in Switzerland for, like, a year, but somehow I was just
Right.
like, "Oh, you just that's, like, a private boundary that, like, you don't cross, right? If you don't" even if you're it's like quote unquote, a roommate or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's someone's private stuff and it's related to
Oh,
like
yeah.
nudity and it's a bit taboo to touch it or acknowledge it. And it's not like that in Switzerland and Germany to the same extent.
No.
And it's not a fundamental like human nervousness around it. It's just the culturally informed, nervousness.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say, like, again, going back to the cultural and just asking, like, I will say, like, again, I've made a lot of friends here who are English, and
Mm.
it is such a spectrum because to your point, I think it's really common here in Switzerland and German, but even I have talked to friends in England, and I would say they're more closely aligned to the American way of things,
Yes.
where it also was a learning curve for them. So that's also interesting to me as well. But you're absolutely right, and sometimes I do think about how sadly, we've become so desensitized to seeing, like, violence and watching, like, all of these, like, really awful things happen on our screen or in person. However, it's like, if you see a boob,
I
it's like, "Oh my
know.
gosh," it's like it's flooring almost.
Mhm.
So I sometimes I'm like, what does that say about kind of our priorities and what we have become, yeah, desensitized or what we're willing to kind of watch and accept versus what, here in Switzerland or Germany, they kind of accept.
Yeah, and it's freeing. Like, I would love to see an American culture where especially women don't have to be preoccupied with stuff like that. Like, I was at a coffee shop yesterday and I overheard 2 women who are new moms, and one was talking about how she wanted to breastfeed in public, but, like, didn't have her wrap and just felt nervous about it, and I'm sure women in Europe also tackle with that, but probably not to the same extent
Not at
because
the
it's
same
more
level, yeah.
open, and it's just like, what a shame that, like, this young mother has to be preoccupied with that versus
Mhm.
taking care of herself or her family, is such an inane thing. So it's like, I wish America could, American culture could embrace that a little bit more so that we wouldn't be preoccupied with things, you know,
Yeah.
that are as silly as, like, exactly like someone saying your boob. Sports bucket. That's great.
Which, let's be honest, we've all seen it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
thank you yeah, exactly. Thank you also for mentioning the UK because I spent a lot of time in Scotland. My twin sister lives there, and I've done a lot of bathing stuff in Scotland and the UK in general. And yeah, they definitely share a very similar culture to America in that respect, I've noticed.
Mhm.
And I don't think any of our listeners think that Europe is homogenous, but it's not, right? Like there's many cultures within Europe. And so even within you have Swiss and German culture which have a lot of overlap, um, at least from what I think I've experienced. But then in England and Scotland, they have a different culture around, nudity as well, so it really varies
Yes.
even within the continent.
Yep, absolutely.
Right, so I wanna talk a little bit about our trip to Helsinki because I think that was a really, impactful one, and it was one of the earlier, like, naked sauna experiences I had. Um, so Alex and I, we both recently visited Helsinki together, and we had this really incredible experience at a public sauna, called Kulttuurisauna. Um, so Kulttuurisauna, it's located pretty close to downtown Helsinki, but it's off the beaten path a little bit. I mean, we were
Mhm.
we
Oh,
were,
yeah.
you know, unsure where we were. Our Uber
Skeptical when
driver,
the Uber just dropped us to what looked like in the middle of nowhere.
"Don't abandon us, please," and he was like, "Bye." Um, we we were fine. But Kulttuurisauna was really, I think, a very singular sauna experience, and I think I realized this more too as I did even more after that. But, some unique things about them, they don't want you booking as a group, so you need to book your sauna session separately, which we didn't. We already sort of went against that, but, they really do encourage more of, like, an individual kind of experience. So Kulttuuri Sauna, just for some background information, they opened in Helsinki in May of 2013. At that time, the public saunas, there weren't a lot of new ones popping up in Helsinki anymore, so this was, I think, an uh, important step for the sauna culture in Helsinki at that time. It was
Mhm.
designed by 2 architects, and they also operate the sauna. And architecturally, it combines both Finnish and Japanese aesthetics, so it is also singular in that way for, like, architecturally. And as I said, they really encourage you to have your own individual experience in the sauna. So going at your own pace, there's no conversations allowed in the hot room, no photos allowed at all in the space, no phones
Yeah.
at all. You can't, they don't even want you taking, you first walk in, you take your shoes off, right? It's quite charming, and you're like, I want to take a photo of this and no photos, which I think also adds, a uniqueness to the experience.
It did. Yeah.
They also have this lovely outdoor space that's just right outside the lobby where you can swim in the Baltic Sea. I know you took advantage of that and you kinda watch the light filtering through the trees that they have back there. And very importantly, nudity, nakedness is part of the experience at Kulttuurisauna. So, let's talk about it. I'm curious to hear about your
Awesome.
experience and kind of what,
Yeah.
um, how you liked it.
I loved it. To your point, and it sounds like maybe it was similar for you, is like it's definitely been one of the more notable, noteworthy sauna experiences that I've had. And I think one of the reasons being that, and I'm bad at names, so I won't remember it, but the other sauna we went to that's right off of kind of like the pier in
Oh, yes.
Helsinki,
I can't remember the name
which
either. Yeah.
yeah, and it was lovely, but it feels a bit more public because there was a
Mhm.
big space for pools where people weren't necessarily sauna, but they were laying out, they're getting in the water, and then sometimes they would go into the sauna. But to me, it felt a little bit more public. You're, like I said, you're right on the pier. So there were even some like tourists. We
Yes.
saw some of the ships coming in and then tourists, and to your point, kind of taking photos of the whole layout. So it just didn't feel as secluded. Um, and so in the culture, and I'm really bad at can you say the name of it for
Oh,
me? Because
cool,
I
yeah.
butcher it every time I say it.
Well, it's probably Kulttuurisauna.
Kulttuurisauna. Yeah,
Um,
Kulttuurisauna. So that one was definitely more secluded, and to your point, we didn't necessarily abide by the rules, we booked kind of all together. However, I do feel like we all went a bit on our own journey because we
mhm.
were definitely at our own pace. Our other friend, she would leave the sauna a little bit earlier, having already had enough. And then she, unlike us, didn't partake in the Baltic Sea. And so again, it was just we were all doing things differently. I think we also, for me, to the point of, like, when it's textile free, it's really trying to build this, I think, like, unique experience, and there was one group of girls I remember who came in bathing suits,
Yes, I
and
remember
so
that
do
too.
you remember it? Because it was the first time, like,
Yeah.
that I was like, "Wait, no, that's not what we're doing here," and so it's like you're not
Mhm.
respecting
Yes.
the rules, the house rules, and so again, everyone has their own journey, so
Mhm.
obviously we didn't make it a big deal, but it just felt like there was something sacred that was a bit disrupted when they did that. But all in all, I would say, yeah, from the architecture to the ambiance, the staff, if you remember, was like they're just
Yes.
so amazing, so
Mhm.
thoughtful. You could truly care. They really cared. Or sorry, you
They
could see
did.
that they cared about the experience that they were creating for you. That was very apparent. And then they had food if you wanted to kind of replenish, and then books and things about just really the history of the
Mhm.
space. And so it felt like the most primal sauna I feel like I've been to in terms of just very raw, the elements, which allowed then, I think, to kinda guide the experience you had and really touch like, for me, I felt like I was in sync with myself in that sauna,
Mhm.
unlike any of the other ones I've been.
I totally agree, and it felt I mean, this was the second sauna we did in Finland, and, it was really we had been used to doing sauna in Switzerland, and so it was also that cultural experience, um, and it was split by men and women, by the way, and I think that was great. I liked that, I think it built a bit more camaraderie between the women, and I loved seeing
Mhm.
women of all ages. There was actually, like, a three-year-old. Is that what
Yes.
Yes, she
I
had
I
which
remember
is
that now.
to me, strikes me as very Finnish, because it is a family experience, and it was
Mhm.
just so lovely to have, like, a little kid there, and I think what a wonderful experience for her to grow up in an environment, like, where she's so open and sees all these other women, like, confident and relaxed and
Yes.
really unbothered by, something, at least in America, we've been told to be bothered about.
Correct, yeah, and how great for the mother, right? Because I think she had, like, a
Mhm.
water basin, and so she
Yes.
filled it with water, she put the young
Cute.
child in there, and then she got to sit down and kind of have her sauna session, and, I don't even know if it was a boy or girl, but the young child was just, like, living life, loving life,
Mhm.
and taking in also that experience, which, yeah, that was definitely notable as well.
I love that. One thing and we talked about this when we
Mhm.
were there, I mean, wow, going from the sauna into the Baltic Sea, okay, like nothing else, man. However, unfortunately, you did have to put your bathing suit back on to go in, and I do wish that you could just go from sauna um, to the sea,
Yes.
I've been doing some reading by Dr. Susanna Soberg, and she talks about this a little bit. And like you can actually start to go into cold shock a little bit early if you put the bathing suit,
Mm,
if you have your bathing suit on. And
okay.
so from a scientific standpoint, right, the benefits, you can delay that when you get into and get the benefits when you go right into the water. But also from an experience standpoint, it would have been nice,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, because you mentioned it at the time. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we did a little debrief after. I just felt like it broke up, like it kind of yeah, it was a bit of like a hurdle in the whole experience. Like it kind of messed the flow up a bit because yeah, you had to come out and the locker room was right there, the changing room. So at least you could get right into your bathing suit. But then especially on busy times, there's a lot of women. So I think it just disrupted kind of my relaxation slightly because you're kind of
Yeah.
fumbling around, especially no
That's
one likes
like
putting on a
I
wet bathing
know.
suit.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we did it multiple times. I think you and
Mhm.
I, we got in and out of the sea probably like 2 or 3 times, and so every time you have to do that. And it just didn't really maybe fit the aesthetic of the like I said, like we're
Yeah.
trying to paint the picture of the place. To me, I think they would have welcomed or encouraged maybe continuing to be textile free into the water, but I don't know if maybe there's regulatory, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But it's such a secluded area that you feel like it feels like it would make sense. And so it was just, I think, that much more not frustrating. Frustrating is too strong of a word, but just a little inconvenient. And it just didn't feel like it fit the experience.
Yeah, I agree, and I've actually only done a couple, like, fully naked cold plunges at this point, but I did my first one at Bad Zurzach, and I have a podcast episode where I talk about that, and I'll have to do a deep
Mm,
dive because
yes.
that was incredible, and that was fully naked, and, I think it is another level when you go into, like, a cold plunge naked with,
Yeah.
like, a bunch of strangers, you're like, "Oh,
That's
okay, yeah,
pinnacle, like,
this is great." I don't know, I reached
yeah.
something, yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, like, I think you don't wanna delay too much when you're going from sauna to cold plunge, and there is something
Yeah.
especially freeing also about going into a naked cold plunge. I don't know why,
Yes.
but you're like, "Oh, I feel, like, extra, empowered by it." So, I do wish we had that for at Kulttuurisauna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think that would've I can see how that could be really freeing. I've actually not done a completely naked cold plunge, so that's gonna be
Oh,
on my
that's up
2025
next.
bingo card. There we go.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
great, great. There's always
Yes.
more always more
Yeah.
naked bathing to do.
New levels to unlock for
Yeah,
sure.
that's great. Cool. So let's pivot a little bit into because we're kind of getting into some of the science behind naked bathing. So there's actually not a lot of good research out there that at least I could find about naked saunas and bathing and kind of like the benefits or downsides between it. Um, I mentioned Dr. Susanna Soberg. I love the podcast she does with Dr. Huberman. She also has a book called Wild Swimming, and she talks about sauna as well. And she has a dedicated section in her book to nudity. And she speaks about this on the podcast with Dr. Huberman. So she explains that there's likely not really a significant benefit to being naked. I mean, when you think about it, right, you get the heat exposure and the cold exposure, regardless of if you're wearing a bathing suit, right?
Right.
But she does acknowledge the anecdotal benefits that we experience, from being naked and bathing, things like, especially the mental sense of freedom and vulnerability. So, thinking anecdotally, do you feel like there are any health benefits of being naked? And do you think it affects your sense of community and connection and maybe even like self esteem or self confidence?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I think it's definitely been an evolution, but I could tell, like, every time I kind of allow myself to enter a sauna, whether women only or mixed, I do feel like I'm getting that much more comfortable with my own
Mm,
skin, my own body. And I don't know if it's so much like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. It's really just like the beauty of the everyone embracing it.
yes.
And sometimes, I know we talk about it, we talk about everyone's made different, everyone has different features, but you really get to see it. And like I
Hmm.
said, it's a sauna shouldn't be a time where you're just scoping everyone's body out, but it's just more like acknowledging and kind of observing how freely people are moving, truly just in their own skin, nothing hiding that. And that to me I think it's more mental, and self-esteem benefits, but also and for me, I sweat a lot, and even though a bathing suit doesn't cover a lot, I do feel like it's a different experience when I
Mhm.
don't have a bathing suit on, and I can just, like, really feel every part of my body getting the, benefits of that sauna. So, again, I think they're probably more intrinsic benefits, but I definitely think they exist.
Yeah, I do too, I agree, and, depending on the type of bathing suit that you're wearing, sometimes there's more fabric and,
Yeah.
yeah, it could just
Yeah, and I'm a
feel.
one-piece girl, and that's a lot of fabric.
Yeah, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and it does you don't feel clean in that,
Yeah,
because you get the sweat pooling and yeah, so I totally
exactly.
get that, and I think you're
Yeah.
right, like, for me, the one of the biggest benefits is yeah, exactly, you hear, "Oh, yeah, everybody's different, everybody is different," right?
Mhm.
But it is like, I think that really hits home when you're in a naked sauna, and for me, honestly, a women-only naked sauna where you're, like, women of all ages and, you know like, just comfortable and you're like, "Okay, everybody is beautiful and confident and, like, in the present moment and just not preoccupied with it," and that's really
Yes.
lovely, and it gives you a sense of confidence in yourself, I think.
Absolutely, and even though everybody's different, I think sometimes you see like, "Oh, like, I have a dimple, she has dimples." Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh,
bodies
yes,
are
yes.
beautiful and,
Yeah.
like, we might be self-conscious at home about, like, how our body looks, and then
Uh,
you get into a room full of women and you're like, there's more similarities than you would think, but also, like, again, everyone's just embracing their uniqueness, and again, I have to acknowledge that as an American, I think I've spent time overthinking it, but I also hope that one day I'm in a sauna and I'm not even thinking about it. Like, that to me is the
yeah.
ultimate goal because it's just such second nature, and then it's truly, like, full liberation at that point.
Yeah, I wish that for both of us, like,
Yeah.
we've both done a lot of sauna, and I am not there. I think the cultural conditioning is really deep, so maybe one day we'll
Yep.
get there, but yeah, that's great. And I did wanna speak a little bit too. I don't know, if you felt any connection to nature. I mean, we unfortunately didn't get to do a wild swimming naked, but is there
Yeah.
any feeling of being closer to nature that you've experienced with naked bathing?
I wouldn't say with naked bathing. I mean, the one that I thought about that we didn't really speak about, but here we have created I think one of our favorite outings in Zurich, which is the Sauna Boat.
Oh,
um,
amazing.
yeah, so Sarah and I with other friends, I think we've done it, what, 4 or 5 times over 2
Mhm.
years,
Yes.
and you truly just get to rent this little electric boat, which is mostly sauna. You drive it to the middle of Lake Zurich, and you can spend 4 hours with friends just sauna. We have not done it textile free, again, because I think we've been with friends that aren't necessarily on the same level, with
Mhm.
being comfortable with textile free, but I think that is something that I feel like I'd like to experience because to your point, I don't think I've done enough of, like, the naked sauna or bathing in nature, and to me, I
Yeah.
do think that that's a big, draw for me, is it again, especially in Zurich, there are beautiful, kind of facilities that they've built around sauna, but I think it's really special when you get a lot more of the nature. Even at 47 at Baden, I love looking over the river, like, there's aspects
Mhm.
that come through, but I think it's really special if it's, like, right in front of you, and incorporated into the experience. So, I don't know, I guess I'd ask you too, because maybe you've had different experiences.
Yeah, I actually haven't had enough. I agree. I
Okay.
think, let's next time I'm in Zurich, let's do the
Yes?
naked
Okay.
sauna boat.
Sauna
We're
boat.
gonna hold each
Perfect.
other to that.
Okay, yes.
One thing we did right before I left Switzerland, we went to a Body, and so, there's a Body on Lake Zurich. I can't remember which one it was actually, but, they had a women's section, and did we do that
Oh,
naked?
yeah. Sea bod.
And we
The sea body.
swam. We did swim, in Lake Zurich, I think.
I don't think we were naked.
I don't now I'm like, I guess we were not. What a shame. Okay, well,
I know,
that's
because
probably the
we
closest we
went
came. Yeah.
You're right, because we went to the women's only area, which many
Oh,
women,
yeah, some
took
women
off
were
their
not.
tops, they had their
Yes.
tops off, but I don't think we swam naked.
We didn't.
Think
Actually,
so.
that's right. It was not
No.
required to be textile free. Some
Correct.
women did have their
Yeah.
tops off. That was the extent. So,
Correct.
um, and by the way, maybe we should explain the bodies a little bit because there are these areas in Switzerland where it's basically public bathing on, a body of water. And in this case, it's Lake Zurich. And you can go, there's sort of this like floating pier basically where they have this pool in the middle. It's right on the lake, so it's lake water. You can swim there. You can also swim out into the lake. They have a sauna there, but it's also just a place to sunbathe and hang out and grab a drink or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah, and that one's really nice because it caters to both, but I don't know if you sorry if you said this, but I think there's some like, there's one really cool that we like, Rimini Bar, but it's a male body only, so during the day,
Yeah,
it's men only, and then at night, it's actually a bar, and then they have a couple on the lake too that are women only, so, yeah, it depends on what you're looking for, but there are quite a few here in Zurich specifically.
great. I'll have to do a deep dive on that. And that's
Yeah.
obviously the inspiration for the name Body with 2 I's,
Mhm.
so Badii, and Body Talk, is the bodies in Switzerland and body culture, which is a bathing culture around it. Do you think there are any downsides in particular to naked bathing or any upsides you just want our listeners to kind of understand?
I don't really think there's any downside. I'm struggling to see where. And I not to and I, again, I don't want this to come off like I'm shaming anyone for not wanting to explore it, but I think I
Mhm.
would just kind of encourage people, obviously to go at your own pace. And I do recognize for listeners in maybe America, I don't know how easy it is to find textile-free
Mhm.
saunas, but if you ever find yourself traveling or if you ever see one, I just think it's kind of a good challenge to really get yourself out of your comfort zone. So if anything, I think the benefits are only really positive. I've not experienced, but I'll report back if I come across any negative ones for sure.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, so in that vein, do you have any tips or advice that you would share to folks that are maybe too nervous to try naked bathing, and what would you do to encourage them?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think I mentioned it in the at the top of this conversation. For me, what helped was finding a moment in a women's only. So again, find what works for you. If you're a woman and you feel like you're not ready yet to mix and mingle, there are at least I hope you can find a women's only. And for me, the other thing that helped was I went at a time that wasn't really busy. So there
Mm.
was really only one or two other women in the sauna, which was a lot less daunting than walking into a sauna that's, you kind of have to walk around to find a place and you got to put your
Yeah.
towel down, a lot more eyes on you. So I would say, maybe reach out to your local saunas, maybe even ask questions like when are some less busy times and really kind of like curate your experience around the time you feel like you're going to be most comfortable in what's gonna probably make you feel a bit uncomfortable,
Yeah.
in
That's
general.
great.
So, I think that would be my tip just to kinda dip your toe.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I agree. I think like starting off, if you're a woman and women's only is a great way to do it, because you will not feel, that judgment or that potential fear that you could have there. I also suggest maybe like going alone at first because sometimes it can be hard to go even with friends that care about, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't go so far as to go with coworkers yet, but yeah, with friends. And or a partner or something. So going alone might be a great way to dip your toe in too. Although, I went to Bad Zurzach with a friend and she was just like, couldn't care less about the naked aspect. And it was also
Yeah.
really nice going with her because it was just like, okay, like
Yeah.
let's just go. And so it can be encouraging. So depending on,
Absolutely.
the comfort level of your friends, maybe that could be a fun thing to try too.
Yeah, and I think one thing I forgot about it is it's becoming more and more popular to, like, rent a sauna or rent like,
Right.
or find a more private sauna. So, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
that's a big option as well, is if you don't feel like you can really come to the point where you're potentially in there with strangers or even friends. Yeah, maybe try to rent a sauna, carve out some time for just you, and then invite people when you're ready. So yeah, there's definitely baby steps
Yeah.
you can take.
And in the States, I've noticed, there's not going to be a lot of public sauna, textile-free saunas. But yeah, to your point, it's much more common in the States to like privately rent a sauna at a spa or, have it delivered like, mobile to delivered to you. And in those cases, I think you can go naked. So maybe that's a great way to try it. I
Yeah.
think that's a great tip. Thank you for joining,
Yeah.
Alex. This is really great. I know
Yes.
our listeners will be excited to hear this topic. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a great topic to talk about. Thank you for bringing me in, and thanks for educating people. I think it's something we should just become more and more comfortable talking about and eventually doing. So,
Yeah,
thank
let's
you.
try to bring a little bit of that culture to the States.
Perfect.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at badii.life, that's BADII.LIFE, and visit our website at badii.life. There you can subscribe to our Body Talk newsletter. Tschüss.